Good morning. This is the little book by Vimala Thakar. Life is to be related. And I just started it yesterday. I'm going to continue today. And it's a series of lectures that she gave in 1988, I think. 1982 even. But this lady was very forward thinking. So it's definitely very applicable now and always. Okay. So yesterday she went through questioning the body and our relationship to the body. See how our questioning takes us step after step, logically. The questioning becomes the teacher. Questioning the validity itself becomes the teacher and takes us further in our understanding, in our discovery. We feel the necessity of understanding the mind. For a first-hand direct understanding, we have to watch the movement of the mind ourselves. So how do we watch the mind? Do we actually know how to watch? And to great dismay, we discover that we do not know how to watch, how to observe. Because watching and observing requires an austerity that after perception, subjective reactions do not come up and get mixed up with the perception. If reaction comes, if it evaluates, compares, gives a judgment from the past, then observation is not taking place. In our lives, we have never observed. We look to compare it with something else, to give it a name, to accept it, to reject it. So we don't know how to observe or how to listen without a motivation. Motivations were fed into us and we're using them. And it obstructs us simply to watch. Observation is a non-reactional attentiveness. We perceive that the involuntary activity of the brain identifies the object, that it gives the name, and then there's a full stop. No further reaction of accepting and rejecting, no likes or dislikes, no preferences and prejudices result from perception. We simply discover that we don't know. We may feel tired when we sit down to watch. That is the moment when an honest person discovers that in the efforts to sophisticate the cerebral brain, we have lost the elegance of simplicity, of looking innocently at anything at all, even for a moment. So we learn to observe. We watch and observe. For a moment, that state of observation remains there. And again, we lapse back into judging and comparing. And again, we've lost the state of observation. So how long does it take to learn observation? It depends on the individual. As soon as the observation is learned, we are no more conscious that we are observing. At the time of learning, we are conscious that we are observing. There is a voluntary division created by ourselves in order to learn. We're looking at the movement of our mind, but that division comes to an end, and the state of observation, a non-reactional attentiveness, becomes a normal dimension. This kind of self-education has to be gone into if the dimension of consciousness is to change, if the ways of living are to change. We are in such a hurry that instead of observing and watching, we would like a technique, a formula, or a method to change everything quicker. My dear friends, if this were to help, one would say, let us do it. But in concentration, we still have to use the past, the content of the mind, the known, the experience contained in the mind. We have to accept some ideal, idol, a mantra, some form, some image, and we gather all our energies and focus and hold them on this point. This concentration stimulates experiences, occult or transcendental. We feel that observation does not give us any experiences. The movement of the past goes into abeyance while we are observing, because it is a non-reactional attentiveness. While in concentration, we get extrasensory perceptions and non-sensual experiences. So, while in concentration, we get extrasensory perceptions and non-sensual experiences, and we are attracted by them. Though we want transformation, mutation, or inner revolution, intellectually, emotionally, we are craving for some new experiences, because our life is experience mongering on the sensual plane. The modern civilization has taught us to increase our needs and wants and deal with proliferation of consumer goods to give more comfort and more pleasure. That is our way of living. Now, a new way of living says we are not going to become a pleasure mongering race. We are not going to run off after comforts and experiences. But we will see what will happen if the mind first becomes steady through observation and then becomes absolutely silent. Then perhaps in that silence of the mind, transformation or mutation might take place. Intellectually, that appeals to us, but emotionally, we are starving for experiences. We've had sensual experiences. We've had bromance with sexual revolutions in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. So we would like now to wander around in the invisible and get experiences. And we feel that those experiences will change us. Those experiences might condition us. There will be new conditionings. We will change the prison house of the mind. So people run after experiences and techniques that give experiences, that stimulate power and experience. Very few really like to learn, to discover, to find out for themselves. The acquisitive tendency changes its field of activity from the physical to the mental, from the visible to the invisible, from the sensual to the occult. Yet it wants to retain the center as the experiencer, the activity of experiencing and the new sensation of experience, even though they may result in injustice and exploitation. We say, don't change the structure. We may qualify and modify the existing structure, but don't touch that. Even for our world peace and global peace, don't touch our concept of national sovereignty. Don't touch our concept of ideological imperialism and yet create peace. We want patchwork in the existing structure because we are afraid that if the whole thing tumbles down, what will happen to us? In the same way, inwardly, we are afraid to let go of the structures, to let go of the activity of experiencing and proceed towards silence, where no action of the ego is possible. Observation leads to the cessation of the mental movements. First, the flame of attention becomes steady, and then the consciousness that we are observing disappears. There's neither the observer nor the observed, and silence reigns supreme in the consciousness of the person. The realm of words, ideas, thoughts, symbols is left behind. We are standing at the frontiers of the known, and the horizons of the unknowable are before us. So one turns away from observation. This reaction, this reaction-free attentiveness doesn't appeal to people. It's very austere and revolutionary if we do not turn away from the state of observation where the consciousness that we are observing also disappears. I'll read it again. The reaction-free attentiveness. This reaction-free attentiveness doesn't appeal to people. It's very austere and revolutionary if we do not turn away from the state of observation where the consciousness that we are observing also disappears. Then there is just the silence of the inner space. There is just inner emptiness and silence. The mind has been denuded of all its activity. The ego, the self, the me, and all its activity have gone into abeyance. This is how it can happen if we experiment. I do not expect you to believe what I'm saying, but perhaps I can persuade you to experiment, explore, and find out for yourselves, not accepting anything. I have not come to you as a teacher or a preacher, but as a friend to share with you how the dimension of consciousness can really change, how a person can be reborn within one's own body, how it is possible to live in utter freedom where one does not follow any pattern whatsoever, where one does not live by any authority whatsoever, old or new. Observation leads to an inner silence. There is no more the I at the center saying to itself, I am observing, but the flame of attentiveness permeates the whole being. The whole person becomes a state of observation. It's a living state of observation expressed through the person. The contents of the mind have been observed by the person. Therefore, there is nothing like subconscious and unconscious for that person. It has become one homogeneous whole for him or her, with no compartments anymore. Throughout the day, the person is observed quietly by that flame of attentiveness, and therefore no possibility of dreams, of tensions, of conflicts. A human race that has succeeded in landing on the moon and creating missiles, I hope, will not say that this is impossible. This is not something for the chosen few. This is the birthright of every human being, to transcend this worn out mind and the cerebral organ which has exhausted its faculties and capacities, ideation, imagination, memory, permutation, combination of all the faculties. It has even created a parallel computer brain and transmitted nearly all the activities of the cerebral organ into it. For that human race, this is not impossible. If there is an urge to explore without any compulsion from outside, without any authority to which we can run if we want to save ourselves, our sanity and freedom, our initiative, keep it intact and discover the fountain of freedom in our own hearts, the fountain of love for which we are starving personally and collectively. Then this will not be impossible. If our hearts have become benumbed and callous and not willing to assert to work on ourselves at all, if we want everything ready-made given to us, then such explorations will not be possible. A religious mind is an austere mind. The urge to create orderliness in our life is an austere urge. So we are face to face with a new dimension of inner silence. Not a single thought moves there. The whole thought structure has ceased to move. So there, no tension on the nerves and no pressure on the chemistry of the body. It is a totally relaxed condition. In the cessation of mental activity is real relaxation, not only physical, but total, in which the healing forces get released and the scars and wounds and scratches which we had suffered in the travail of life get healed by this silence. When I say that a person is born within, when I say that a person is reborn within, I'm not using figurative language at all. It's just a simple statement of a fact. In that inner silence, uncluttered by thought, the energy of intelligence gets activized. It's an unconditioned energy and not a part of cerebral energy. It is also not something physical, muscular, or cerebral. The energy born of silence in the inner space is not a part of inheritance. The qualities of the brain are to a very great extent a part of the physical and psychological inheritance. So the qualities of the brain are to a very great extent a part of the physical and physiological inheritance, but silence is not. Intelligence, The energy of silence activated in that state has nothing whatsoever to do with this inheritance. In the dimension of silence, the energy of intelligence begins to move and operate. It looks through the eyes. It's a kind of new sight. It uses the brain, the known, the memory. So intelligence, qualitatively different from intellect, begins to operate. That intelligence has no center. Intellect, the mind and its whole contrivance, is the creation of the center as the me, the I, the ego. We know the whole structure of the mind, how the I consciousness is born, how it has a conceptual but not a physical reality. Intelligence is not a move of the intellect. So intelligence is not a move of the intellect which divides life into the me and the not me. It's an intelligence that looks through the eyes and it takes its sweep. Okay. Intelligence Intelligence is not a move of the intellect, which divides life into the me and the not me. It's intelligence that looks through the eyes, and it takes into its sweep the totality. It is aware of itself as part of the totality, and it is aware of what it is observing also as part of the totality. It never sees the particular in isolation from the totality. The movement of intelligence is the awareness of totality. The same person, now looking with the same eyes, sees an absolutely different world, an awareness of the totality and the particular as an organic part of the total. The part in the total, with the total, within the total, and therefore the relationship with the total also goes through a qualitative change. On the mental level, perception was born of the mood of the mind. If we were depressed, the same object appeared to us in a different color. If we are excited or in a joyous mood, the same object appears to us qualitatively different. The mood, the state of the mind, was using the senses and determining the quality of perception. But intelligence has no moods. The content of intelligence is silence. It's a smokeless flame of awareness that burns bright once it is lit, and therefore perception changes, and the responses also change with it. There's a spontaneity now. No bargaining with the external situation. No bargaining at the counter of relationship. The awareness of the whole stimulates love, compassion, a tenderness of the heart, and concern for all. Therefore the responses are spontaneous. No calculation, no manipulation, no maneuvering of our own behavior or the behavior of the other, but a simple and graceful spontaneity. That is how human beings change. Gone is the acquisitive tendency for security and therefore constant chronic fear which the mind suffers, and there dawns a day of fearlessness, perception resulting in understanding and a spontaneous response to circumstances. What we have been going through for this last 1 hour, through this verbal communication, is really what meditation is. We are trying to commune with one another with the help of verbal communication. We were taking the journey together, trying to reach out to one another and investigate together, writing over words and their meanings. We began by saying that humanity is really perplexed and a victim of inner contradictions. We cannot save the world, and we do not see any saviors in the world. But can we save ourselves, or are we waiting for someone to come and save us? Those who are not interested in waiting, but feel a concern and a sense of urgency, begin to question, is it possible to have a different way of living? And where does this questioning begin? It begins from the physical, and if we want to explore a different way of living, or a new way of living, obviously disorder is not the way. To allow the new to enter into us, we have to eliminate the disorder. On the physical level, we get acquainted with the body, with its demands, its needs, its requirements, and eliminate the disorder. There's one more page and a bit. I'm just going to finish the chapter. So how does the disorder come in? If we are behaving mechanistically and repeating habits without ever going into the question, why should there be habits at all? Why should each dawn not be new for us? Why should there be habits? We turn to the physical, get acquainted, and in that acquaintance, if we at all experiment and turn to the physical world, we will discover, as I did, that we were just repeating and repeating, never questioning the validity of that repetition. One says, stop repetition. We were repeating because we had accepted some authority of the past, of the persons, of the ideologies, of the scriptures, of the so-called gods. We don't deny anything, but we see that we must keep that authority aside if we want to find out and discover for ourselves. If we want to be nourished, we have to take the meal ourselves. No one else can eat for us. In the same way, if we like to be nourished on the truth of life, we must discover, In the same way, if we would like to be nourished on the truth of life that we must discover, we brush aside the authority, not in arrogance, but with all humility. We don't want to repeat the past experiences of the greatest person in the world, because repetition is not life. It is suicide. Conforming to the habit patterns of life might have been not only very noble and grand and useful, but it is not living. Living is an act out of freedom. To live is to move freely, fearlessly with the movement of life. But we are not moving because we are busy repeating. So we see this and we stop repeating. Once we understand what is wrong, we cannot continue doing the same wrong thing, can we? We discover and stop repetition. We stop conforming. The first step has to be taken fearlessly, and humility provides the fearlessness. Arrogance leads to cowardliness. Humility results in fear. Humility results in fearlessness. So no repetition, no conforming, and no authority. We neither accept nor reject it. We just brush it aside. But then there will be nobody to tell us if we are doing the right thing or the wrong thing. We will be insecure. Yes, we will be insecure, but we will be with life. We're afraid to be alone with life. We want to be with life via the past of the human race. We would like to be with even God via Christ, Krishna, or the Buddha, but not in direct contact, a direct encounter with life. When we brush aside the authorities and patterns, then we are left alone with the total life around us and within us, and vulnerable to the operation of life upon us. Isn't that beautiful? Every discovery has insecurity, but there is great fun in that insecurity. We cannot explore what freedom is while all the time we are worrying about it, if we are protected or not. So we cannot discover what freedom is while all the time we are worrying about if we are being protected or not. So we proceed with a willingness to be insecure in the solitude with life. That is why I said that a religious inquiry requires the strength of austerity to be alone with life. It seems to me that as the world situation is grave, a revolutionary social action, beginning with our individual lives, is urgent. One feels as if the house in which man has lived and the culture and civilization are set on fire. The cultural, religious, political institutions and organizations are tumbling down. The myth of national sovereignty is getting exploded. International law and justice is not proving effective in helping nations to solve their problems. A drastic social action of exploring alternative ways of living, new dimensions of consciousness, and living out of these dimensions is necessary. A religious revolution is urgently necessary, and it begins, as always, with oneself. I do hope people in an affluent country like Australia who have an opportunity to explore the psychic avenues and new dynamics of human relationships will take advantage of that opportunity. I do hope that the economic and political stability that they have created be utilized for such explorations. The countries that are suffering from poverty and starvation are busy with their economic problems. But such religious explorations can be undertaken by the people in affluent countries, and I hope the youth of Australia will wake up to the challenges confronting the human race and tackle them independently in complete freedom and fearless humility. This is the end of chapter 1. It's not really a chapter, it's the end of her first talk that she gave in Sydney, Australia in 1982 on the 5th of July. Is that correct? No, on the 7th of May 1982. Have a really good day. Bye for now.